NXT in the current day is great because you can throw things at the wall and see what sticks. This is why it's awesome that it does exist. You can have more fun than on Raw or SmackDown. I do believe it's been designed that way. Of course, the idea of a developmental brand has been around for a long old time now, and look, you can't hit home runs every single day, and actually it is better to drop the ball here and there. I do believe that is how we learn. So let us get in our time machines and go back in time, obviously, to see who stepped into the spotlight before we had to rethink things. Let's find out. Number 25, Eli Cottonwood. So we start off with a difficult one. Promo we're going to talk about did derail Eli Cottonwood, but man, all things considered, I kind of love it. This was during a time when NXT was more of a game show than a third brand, and therefore the roster were basically contestants. It meant they had to do weird challenges such as cut promos about facial hair. I mean, why not? Eli was given moustaches before going on this incredible tirade about how he didn't have one, but maybe he should. His fellow rivals should also consider sporting some fluff under their nose. I mean, he actually sounded crazy. Today, he likely would have become a cult hero, but the internet was far crueler in 2012, I suppose. And after some ridicule, he sort of vanished, and then he was released. Cottonwood was a giant, so it felt like he may get a stay of execution, especially as he sort of teamed up with Bray Wyatt for a bit. Sadly not. This was the end. Number 24, Damager versus Doug Basham. In the early 2000s, OVW took these two on their developmental show, and my gosh, they made one hell of a rivalry. If you go down the rabbit hole, you will see Damager and Doug Basham engage in all-out wrestling war, with hardcore fans praising it. Why wasn't this stuff happening on the main roster? Well, I'm about to tell you. Because given the noise, we did call them up, and the first thing we did was make them the Basham Brothers. That's right, they became a team. Now, if you only watch Raw and SmackDown, you didn't know this, but not only did it ruin their program in OVW, but it left Doug and Danny, as they were now known, in no man's land. Vince McMahon didn't care about tag teams in 2003. Whatever heat they'd built up was now gone. What was the point in that? OVW booker Jim Cornette had to retcon his story to pretend this was their master plan too, and trust me, it was not. Maybe it would have been better had NXT existed back then because there may have been some synergy. Instead, it ruined the whole thing and left these two totally pathless. I mean, I guess you have to say whoops. Number 23, Richie Steamboat. This one was always going to be difficult, but it also made sense to try. If you do have the son of Ricky Steamboat, you need to see what he can do. There's every chance Richie could have been success too, but it was like the wrestling powers that be were out to get him. He was sidelined a lot with injuries, and because of that, he never got any good stories. He was always just sort of the son of a legend. Richie could go all things considered, but 2012 was not a time when that was enough. You needed character and promos, and I suppose this highlighted the double-edged sword of being a second-generation superstar. It is not easy. One final injury took him out for good, although it actually does have a happy ending. Father Ricky has said many a time his boy is perfectly content with a smile on his face, and that rules. That's all that matters. Life is there to be loved. Number 22, Lucky Cannon. We have talked about Lucky before. It certainly feels like this was wrong place, wrong time. I mean, Cannon was introduced as part of the game show concept. Once again, that was never easy. This meant he too was given a promo out of nowhere on live TV, and sure, it wasn't ideal by any stretch, but Lucky was judged on this and only this. Surely the idea of such a task should be to see somebody fail, and then we can see how they pick themselves back up again afterwards. It's what Bruce Wayne was talking about. WWE eventually tried to make him a womanizing heel in his second year, but this felt like it wasn't given the attention it would need to actually get anywhere. Just an uphill battle. Cannon would be released in 2011, and after a short independent run, certainly seems like he hung up his boots. That's another one, so I'll say it again, I just hope he's happy. At least he gave it a go, and really, he did get quite far. Ain't too shabby to have WWE on your resume. Number 21, Jacob Novak. Jacob Novak did stand alongside the likes of the Future Fandango and EC3, and hey, some sort of potential across the board. It just needed to be harnessed. Sadly, one of the challenges given to Jacob was to verbally go toe-to-toe with William Regal before a match. Given Novak had nowhere near the experience, he got wrecked by Regal, because of course he did. It's William Regal. He is one of the all-timers. Look at his career. The match was then just mostly okay, and because Novak couldn't hang, I think we just decided he wasn't it. Hey, maybe management was right, but the decisions came so fast. If you had taken a liking to him, you must have been mystified. One day he just vanished, and he was never to be seen again. I mean, we probably should have put his picture on a milk carton. Number 20, Bo Dallas. The babyface version. That heel version, good grief, it's what made me fall in love with NXT originally. Before he became the dude who thought he deserved it all though, Bo was pushed as a sort of happy-go-lucky good guy. And yeah, fans didn't take to it. WWE must have been keen as he won a mini battle royal to get in the actual Rumble, and not long after that he defeated Big E to become the NXT champion. Big E at the time felt unstoppable too. This was a huge deal. Soon after though, the NXT crowd just decided they didn't want to wait around anymore, so yeah, they turned on Bo's ass, and bless that guy, he leaned right into it and it ruled. The Bo leaves stuff while just ignoring the clear hate, or dare I say it, was wonderful. It also goes to show, I suppose. Doesn't actually matter if you trial and fail in NXT, that's the whole point. I feel like I'm repeating myself, but if something isn't clicking, just going switch it could actually find some magic. Number 19, Leakee. Or Roman Reigns. That's right, tied into what we just said, this was version 1, not Matt Hardy. It's why I really don't mind it, because what, you're gonna start him off as the tribal chief? Of course not. Leakee, as he was known, was the most cookie-cutter babyface ever. For some reason, he loved to shout his name. He used that to become a pretty standard arrogant heel. I guess that was a bit more intriguing. You could see a little bit of the head of the table within that character. His athleticism is obvious too, and you can tell why WWE wanted him to figure it out. The man has something. That's why they put him in the Shield, even though you could have said he would have benefited from more time in NXT. Once again, let's look at the results. It was not an easy ride, and this certainly wasn't a success, but we did get there. Sometimes John Cena is right. Don't give up. Number 18, Tino Sabatelli. You could say that Tino Sabatelli was ahead of his time. He came from the world of the NFL right into NXT. That's basically what we do now all the time. Tino seemed to have the character side down too and cut some decent promos, and really it was injuries that slowed him down. It felt like any time he was good to go, he had to take some time off, and due to that, those around him were able to progress. At one point, he was away for 12 months with a torn pec. The pandemic seemingly then screwed him because he was rehired in 2020, and he was just let go again in 2021. He did pop up in AEW between those dates, but look, this guy played 5 seasons in the NFL. He is totally fine. Number 17, Solomon Crowe. The crazy thing about the now Sami Callihan is that his Solomon Crowe character would have skyrocketed in today's version of NXT. They love stuff like this. He was well into hacking in 2014, and that's the right side of madness for what WWE's third brand is into. I suppose when it was a bit more black and gold, this came across as a bit goofy. Crowe did have the oddest finisher known to man, as he sort of did this rope-propelled headbutt. Whatever the reason for this not working, it did not come down to what Solomon did in the ring. Even on a bad day, he was pretty solid. Really, WWE should have let him become more unhinged, which is what he did when he left NXT. Since then, he never really looked back. So maybe we normalized him too much. Maybe it just wasn't the right time. Sami Callihan is still going strong though. So he has had one hell of a run. Number 16, Andy Levine. I really don't know what happened here. This is no shade to Andy Levine. He got his head down and made his tough enough experience work. He won the thing. Just don't think it was the right choice. The fact his nickname was Silent Rage summed it up. This was WWE, where Vince McMahon absolutely wanted you to talk nonsense on the main roster, hence why when Andy properly debuted, Vince slapped him, trainer Steve Austin dropped him. Welcome to the big time. I'm not sure Levine ever recovered from that because it made him look so silly, and even though he only won the competition in 2011, he was gone by 2012. The WWE was just so character-driven then, and we also had Luke as a contestant. That dude was such a wonderful asshole. Still no idea what happened. Number 15, Sylvester Lefort. Just weird booking this, because Sylvester was another one. He had something. He stood out and sort of had a good relationship with the then Full Sail crowd. Then he had a hair versus hair match with Enzo. Yeah, what the flub happened there? Because Enzo Amore did win, and yet Lefort wasn't involved in the payoff. His tag team partner Marcus Lewis stood up, and he got rid of his hair instead. Instantly, fans were then a bit like, well, we'll just go and cheer him then. Again, this was an angle that would have worked way better today, but this was at a takeover show back in 2014, and it's not like Sylvester went super bad guy after this. He sort of just plodded on regardless. There really wasn't any follow-up either, so Paul Sylvester was just the dude that made his friend go bald. Come 2016, both were released, and it felt like there could have been more. We just never found it. Number 14, Leo Krueger. Do you want to know who Leo Krueger became? Adam Rose. That's right, the dude with his weird friends that dressed like bunnies. I am going to keep repeating myself, but there is no other way to say it. The idea behind Leo probably would have flown today. I mean, he was meant to be some sort of South African hunter, and while he was slightly over the top, he was creepy too. Think of the 2025 vignettes we could have done. I suppose you could say this was an old school approach, which is what modern NXT does a lot, but when it didn't click as expected, we gave him the rosebuds, and look, it worked and made it all the way to the main roster. If we are talking about Krueger though, it was stopped totally, but people still do talk about this persona fondly. I mean, it did click and got some chats going, so it's all good. A conversation piece for sure. Number 13, Bull Dempsey. Today known as Bull James, and here's a fun fact. I did a tour with James. He was a very pleasant man. NXT actually figured out a good way to present Dempsey before he got caught up in the machine. The whole idea was he was a throwback, an old-fashioned bulldozer who was gonna smash you no matter what. He sort of met his equal in Baron Corbin early on, which would have been fun as a tag team, but as ever after that, Bull needed something else, so tried his hand as an exercise guru. Please don't make me say it for the 78th time. Imagine this today. Chase U would have loved it. I think NXT may have leaned into the joke too much as James got beaten a lot. That would have been fine had we had any follow-up at all. We didn't, and after a while, fans just thought he was there to be beaten. That did catch up to him in 2016 when he was part of that round of releases, and it just felt like we lost focus along the way. That did happen a lot when NXT was more of a developmental brand than a third brand. Kinda just went through a hell of a lot of phases. Number 12, Leviathan. So this is interesting because the man behind Leviathan went on to become an all-time great. This was the start of Batista. It's why it's important to include it, because in developmental you should be afforded the ability to fail. It's another thing they keep saying. Leviathan wasn't terrible in the sense Big Dave did look like a giant monster from the deep. At the same time, did he need a supernatural persona in the old OVW? Doubtful. It sort of helped his in-ring style as Batista was allowed to take it slowly, but it nullified his personality. Go watch him years later, was most definitely there. It's why we missed the mark with Deacon Batista too when he did debut on SmackDown as Reverend Devon's helper. I mean, listen to that sentence. That's genuinely crazy. It wasn't until 2003 when we put him in Evolution, and from there it just worked. So yeah, next time we do have a diamond in the rough, let's take our time. You just never know how far it's gonna go. Number 11, the Minnesota Stretch Wrecking Crew. Let's carry on that thought process too. This was indeed the team of Shelton Benjamin and Brock Lesnar. Both went on to do all right. The logic was sound as they both were from Minnesota College and Benjamin had helped train Brock, so the connection was there. They had real chemistry too, and the balance may have been perfect. Lesnar would run through you as Shelton would finish you off with his technical skill, so why didn't it work? Simple. This was an OVW team, and much like Raw and SmackDown in 2001, the singles division was just the focus. Made sense, because Jim Cornette likely knew how Vince McMahon felt about duos. As soon as he locked eyes on Lesnar too, he was on the main roster, but thankfully Benjamin got put with Charlie Haas to carry this idea on. So I think calling it a failure would be a little unfair. It was just a concept that was lost before it saw its natural conclusion. If you can find some clips today, make sure you do it. This was flipping magic. Number 10, Gable Steveson. So we shall throw a more recent one in here too, because Gable Steveson was meant to be the next big thing, and then quite literally nothing happened. I mean, he did appear on a WrestleMania when he beat up Chad Gable, but all this time we just heard, oh my gosh, Gable is gonna be so big. Well, we never really even saw him perform in NXT. Then he had that match with Baron Corbin, who can have a good fight with anyone. And well, the less said about it, the better. The fact he got released soon after this kind of sums it up, and it just felt like Gable Steveson and WWE never saw eye to eye. I really would like more information about this, and because it is wrestling, I'm sure somebody will talk about it eventually. But there are some funny quotes out there too about how Gable saw the wrestling business. Dare I say he may not have taken this seriously. Deep down his tum-tum, he just wanted to go back to amateur wrestling. Again, watch this space, because one day we will learn. The 9, Conor Reeves. Conor Reeves as the finest was a good idea. He had a delusional arrogance to hide his fear of the world, and in that sense it made him a wonderful asshole. For some reason it never exploded like it looked like it could do, but his in-ring work was always fine. The main issue was he did fight away in NXT for 7 years, but throughout that time he didn't really evolve as a character. This was when the brand was just making forward steps all of the time. You sort of had to move with it, otherwise this happened, you felt left behind. There was definitely a role for him as somebody who could call people out and then get killed. I suppose WWE felt like they had other roster members to do that. Eventually he was released. As Noah Kakoa, he's still going on the indie scene though, and that's the main thing. He's getting work. Good for that guy. Number 8, Santana Garrett. This one is a huge conversation, because when Santana Garrett signed with NXT, fans were excited. She looked really good. She'd also done well on the indies, had the personality to make it work in WWE, and had crowd support. It's perfect. and for some reason it never really went anywhere. NXT kept making her the plucky underdog even though she'd been around for a while, so that didn't help, and soon it became obvious. Santana was losing to more established stars a lot. That is not the role we envisioned. When that happens too much as well, the audience does sort of forget, and in 2021 she was part of those big WWE releases, and it really was a bit of a shame. She is still going now, however, and has been in WoW, and actually also got murdered by Jade Cargill on an episode of AEW. So we'll just double down on what we said a few seconds ago. She's making it work. That's what you like to see. James Storm. Another story for you. 5 days before I recorded this video, I faced James Storm in UK independent promotion UPW, and he super kicked me right in the face. Thank you, James. The best part of Storm's story in NXT is that he called all the shots. The irony. If we go with the rumor mill too, WWE tried to sign him on multiple occasions, but the cowboy knew his worth. So he didn't fail at all. He just got offered more money by TNA, so he went there. Can't get mad at it. Even though he was only in the NXT brand for a cup of coffee, he still made things click. Fans knew who he was, Storm knew what he was doing. If anything, going back to TNA just surprised the audience. It felt like we were good to go. He would have made the main roster, no problem. The man is still going strong today though, so it's another one. Know your worth, believe in yourself. Who the flub knows where you'll end up. Number 6, Xyon Quinn. Xyon Quinn seemingly had it all. He was big, he was athletic, and he seemed to know what he was doing. But much like other people on this list, he spent 6 years in NXT, and before long, well, you've seen it. Doesn't seem like we're changing. What exactly are we going to do? He did have some really good matches there as well, but it never felt like the character moved forward. He absolutely could have benefited from more stories like the ones he did with Quincy Elliott because they were fun. And look, he made it to the main roster. Maybe that was the issue. Because it was 2023 where he became a free agent for either Raw and SmackDown. Kind of went after Gunther's IC title. I mean, he was in that #1 contender battle royal when the Viking Raiders threw him out. That did kind of make him feel like he was in the background. Soon after that, Bron Breakker wrecked him in 6 seconds, and that was that. He was released. Sort of felt like WWE just didn't have an idea, but look, the real-life Daniel Verdot has an incredible rugby career. He's another one that is doing okay. Number 5, Michael Tarver. Sadly, Michael Tarver is remembered for being the forgotten guy from the Nexus. That's not fair. He really suffered after the group had been called up because once John Cena had finished them off at SummerSlam, there was just no place for some of these dudes to go. Even Wade Barrett had a rocky road and he was the flippin' leader. If there had been any commitment to the side characters, Tarver would have been fine because he knew what he was doing. It just didn't feel like anyone even remembered he was around because he was never featured. So I really do think this one is a shame and we could have easily have done so much more, but we just didn't. How many times have we heard that story in wrestling? Number 4, CJ Parker. I mean, today, he is Juice Robinson. That dude has done more than all right. Just feels weird this didn't happen more in NXT. Given the Juice is totally nuts, I think maybe CJ Parker was just too normal for him. He was alright as the classic arrogant heel, but he was mostly used as a setup guy. For example, Kevin Owens defeated him in his debut match. That became his role too, as Baron Corbin squashed him during his first fight, and Parker just never got the breakout moment he deserved. It took leaving NXT to underline what he did have, mostly because the character was now allowed to breathe, and then he became a maniac. I suppose you could say that NXT was used as a learning ground for him, and he did benefit. You don't find success by accident, and he took all of this, and yep, he made a name for himself. Number 3, the Robert Stone brand. Robert Stone is very good at this. He can talk, he understands what NXT wants, and he's very fun to watch. The issue is, when it came to his stable of wrestlers, well, it sort of fell by the wayside. Notable names were Chelsea Green, Mercedes Martinez, Aaliyah, and Jessie Camilla, and apart from Chelsea, the other 3 were released. Let's be honest too, Green also got let go, but she was so good she found her way back. Thank goodness for that. They just lack direction, and while I love goofy wrestling, it is for life, I think NXT saw them as too much of a punchline. Do you remember when Rhea Ripley was going to have to join them if she lost the match? Well, she won, and that meant she didn't have to. That is the most non-wrestling thing ever, and that kind of wraps it up in a nice little package. Number 2, the Forgotten Sons. This one was just all over the place. What exactly was the idea? Obviously, they were meant to be a military-inspired faction filled with disenfranchised veterans who had been forgotten by their country. Now, that's some heavy-handed stuff, but the way they played it sort of meant they were sympathetic heels. That's not a thing. Those two words don't go together. Creative also didn't know what to do, so soon they just became angry people, and it felt like they got called up to the main roster with Elias in mind. That guy performed better on Raw. Maybe these dudes will too. Nothing changed because up there WWE still had no idea what this was meant to be, which is when Jackson Riker made some really controversial comments, and soon they were all let go. Thankfully, Steve Cutler went on to become Steve Macklin, who's had a great run in TNA, whereas the other two seem to be done with wrestling altogether. Number 1, Toni Storm. It is just mad what WWE chose to do with her. Toni Storm right now could be the best all-round performer in the world. This is crazy. She was way better in NXT UK as the women's champion, but as soon as she got moved to NXT proper, and then onto the main roster, who the flub knows? A 2020 heel turn didn't seem to make much sense given how likable Toni was. And look, she was having great matches all of the time. That was never the issue. But when she was put onto Raw and SmackDown, WWE had Charlotte Flair throw a pie in her face. Maybe that doesn't sound too bad, but go and watch it, and then go and compare it to her work in AEW. We did not take advantage of what was here. Her departure from the company was a bit strange, but she did debut in All Elite Wrestling in March 2022, and when you look at it now, there is no question Toni Storm is one of the best signings that company ever made. Know of anybody else that tried their luck in developmental but didn't really make it as far as we expected? Well, make sure you let us know in the comments below. Before you like the video, share the video and subscribe. You can also click the video on the screen to get even more information about professional wrestling in your life, but otherwise, take care, my friends, interact with this video, and I will talk to you again very soon.